Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited today to have Rick Summers and Brian Foligno on. Rick is the editor-in-chief, chief editor of PGA Magazine, and Brian Foligno is the president of PGA Magazine. I was fortunate enough to meet both of them up at Bandon Dunes back in November, and we've been communicating back and forth since, and they've agreed to carve out some time for us this morning to come on the Catalyst and be interviewed. Obviously, the PGA Magazine is the longest running sports magazine in the country. We'll get right into the Q&A. Rick, Brian, can you guys talk about PGA Magazine's humble beginnings and what the original purpose of the magazine was and where it has evolved into today?
Sure. This is Rick Summers. I'll take this first one. Nice, easy lob. I like that. Thank you. So I took this off my wall. If you can see it, this is the first cover of PGA Magazine. It goes back to 1920. So in May, we will celebrate 103 years of continuous publication. And every copy is in the archive back at PGA headquarters or the Hall of Fame or something. And I don't know if they moved them since moving to Frisco or not, but they are bound. And it's kind of cool to look back at that. So 1920 was the fourth year of the PGA of America. So it took a few years, and the magazine started out at about 24 to 32 pages. We took it over. We licensed the rights from the PGA of America. So the PGA of America, this is your magazine. You own it. We don't own it. And we licensed the rights to publish it under a long-term agreement with the PGA. And that started in 2001, in January of 2001. Prior to that, a different publisher had it. They ran into some problems in 2000. Joe Steranko, who was the CEO at the time of the PGA, sat me down at the PGA Championship and said, we'd like to know if you would like to take over publishing PGA Magazine. And we had worked with the PGA on a number of different things before. And I said, what is PGA Magazine? So I had been in publishing for 12 years and started this company with Jack Nicklaus for the first 16 years of the company, bought his shares back in 2004, about 3 years after we started PGA Magazine. And so that's a brief history of the magazine. It is much different than it was in 1920, obviously, but it is really much different than it was in 2001. When we took it over, the license agreement was for literally a print magazine only. And as Brian will talk to you right now, we're much, much more than just the print magazine, which we think is vitally important to the PGA of America and particularly to the members. Brian, why don't you tell them how it's changed a little since 2001?
Yes, I mean, I think it's important to know that this is my 20th year with Rick. So the evolution of PGA Magazine as an umbrella has certainly changed as it relates to print and some of the digital assets that we have. And then especially what you alluded to, John, is at Bandon Dunes, the Professional of the Year, the event space, and getting PGA professionals together to learn from each other. That's really what we try to orchestrate across print, digital, or experiential. So we're much more focused on how can we get members together or highlight members in print or through best practices, using PGA professionals' best practices to highlight various opportunities for them to share their ideas of what they do at their facility and what they could share and what their peers could learn. So yes, there's literally 94 different assets, what we call them, platforms, programs under PGA Magazine umbrella. And we can dive into some of those a little bit later, but that's from an overarching perspective of how we look at PGA Magazine. It's much, much more than just the print publication. that is 12 times a year. Yes, the content is super important, and how we do it in the magazine is a variety of different sections, and it's all geared to have PGA members engaged. So that's a big part of how we manage just the content sharing and making sure that it's peer-to-peer, member to member. That's a big focus of ours.
And Brian, can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with PGA Magazine prior to 2001?
It's a little funny. I was I like to call it the real world in corporate America, if you want to call it that. Before I met Rick, and shortly before I met Rick, I tried to cut my teeth at playing for a living, and then I realized that I was starving at the same time. But I wasn't too bad. I'm a plus one or two here or there. But at the same time, I knew that the sport, as well as corporate and what I had been involved in before, it was just a perfect opportunity that came really across me being able to be a part of something that I think was really a unique situation where you can be a part of something much, much bigger, be a part of the sport, be a part of the game. We do believe in playing golf. So we do still play golf in our environment. But that's really where I started back in, and it was really about golf travel back then. It was really, how do we elevate the growth and the engagement of PGA professionals through golf travel? So that was really where we started. And some of you might remember, John, you might remember some of the destinations, the golf travel section in PGA Magazine, where PGA professionals would be able to have access to various opportunities to take members or guests, or to refer people to different golf destinations. So we built that program up in the magazine. But I'm a native Southern California. I think, John, you know that. I was born in Santa Monica. I grew up in Ventura County and have family up and through the valley and up in Ventura County still. So it's something that's close to me. And living in Phoenix now, it's actually easier to get from Phoenix to San Diego or Orange County than where I was living in Valencia with all the traffic. But yeah, that's how I got involved. PGA Magazine originally.
Obviously all of us get the magazine and we read the magazine, and it's curious, how do you guys gather content? How do you capture stories? Can you talk a little bit about the network of gathering information and content, and how you put the magazine together from a stories and content standpoint?
Yeah, so I'll take this. John introduced me as the editor. I'm actually not the editor. The editor is Matt Marsham. Not too many people know what he looks like. He just sits in his little cubicle and hasn't come out in 25 years. So we actually took over the magazine, and the only thing that's the same about the magazine probably from 2001 is that Matt Marsham is still the editor, and he was in 2000 as well. But I'm the CEO, and so this is the magazine of the PGA of America. So they read every word before it gets published. And I want to make sure you know that is serious. So the way in which, to answer John's question, and that came from one of you, I believe, is the way it comes together is we look very carefully at the trends within golf. We want to stay ahead of the trends as much as possible. We have an immense advantage. We are in the field doing 160 events that you've heard a little bit about, in addition to obviously publishing a magazine. So what that means is we're in front of almost 3,000 PGA professionals every year, not including Demo Day, which we own half of, and we started Demo Day at the show. But those interactions with PGA professionals really start that process of what do they care about most, and how does that fit into what we should be reporting. The PGA, about September of each year, we sit down with the PGA and we say, here are stories that we believe are going to be most relevant to the membership of the PGA, not to the PGA headquarters, but I may get in trouble since this is on tape, but to the members first. We obviously have to write about the show. We want to write about the show. We want to write about the PGA Championship and the Ryder Cup this year, for example. But we believe the magazine should be member first. And in fact, everything we do on our events is, if it's not going to benefit the members, let's not do it. And that's very serious, by the way.
Yes, and then we do have a circle, if you will, that has a variety of different assets and deliverables and things that we do across some of these areas. And in the middle of that circle is the PGA professional. Literally, we spell it out. Because when we evaluate a program or an opportunity or a platform or ideas that people come to us with, we just simply ask ourselves that one simple question: is it good for the PGA professional?
So we now have an editorial calendar for 2023, quote, set, unquote. Nothing's set, because if something happens with everything that's happening in the world today, if something happens, obviously we have to pivot, just like all of you have to pivot at your facilities, et cetera, depending upon circumstances. So, but we right now could tell you what the 12 cover stories are, and then how we're going to have the secondary stories within each issue. So what we try to do, just to answer the question for John, is in an issue like the Ryder Cup, which, yes, it does impact all of you tremendously, because the Ryder Cup brings in so many dollars for the PGA of America, and it funds many of their programs. It doesn't impact necessarily each of you at your home course as much as articles about what trends or whatever. So within each of those kinds of cover stories, there's a secondary cover story, in essence, that we take very seriously. So we already know every issue we want to cover instruction, but we also want to make sure instruction, coaching, and teaching are primary in one issue a year. It's a cover story. We know that when a new president comes in, we always want to make sure the membership knows about the new president. So that happens every 2 years or whatever. We want to make sure that certain subject matters are always covered. Diversity, inclusion are always covered in every issue. So those are also checklists that we go through with the PGA and with the various departments within the PGA at the front end. Career development, we want to make sure that's always covered in PGA Magazine. So with the career counselors or otherwise. So coaching, teaching, tournament and outings, travel impacts, literally 7,000 PGA professionals we believe are directly tied into travel. So there's a travel issue late in the year every year. The awards issue is a very important issue, because we think you can see who won the awards, recognize those who won them, and also that you can follow up with those people if you so choose. So that's an important issue at the section level, to make sure those section winners are all spelled out across all the different awards that are given. So that's how that process takes place.
Well, you guys do such a great job of promoting the initiatives of the PGA of America, in particular with the PGM 3.0 program, and also the divisibility of associates being able to select to go down executive leadership, golf operations, or teaching and coaching. You guys have done such a great job showcasing the PGA GMs. It's such an excellent thing. What new initiatives do you have on the horizon from an educational standpoint in promoting associates through the magazine?
So Brian, do you want to take that, or you want me to take that?
Why don't you go ahead and start, and then I'll weave in some additional things.
Okay, so first and foremost, and probably important for everybody to know, that PGA Magazine is only a piece of what we do. So, which is great for the PGA. Just as an example, about 10 years ago, I got a call from the PGA that said, we want you to actually take over the Golf Range Association of America, which was already 20 years old, 19, I think, at the time. And I said, why would we want to take it over? We already do a magazine that reaches almost everybody who runs the better golf ranges we could just put content in. They said, no, we think it's important. We want every golf range to hire more PGA professionals. And we see growth of the game as being extremely important to our mission and helping PGA professionals if there are more job opportunities for leadership, et cetera. So this was 10 years ago. So we would like you to do this, Rick. And for the first few years, we'll actually help you do it. They no longer give us any checks, but they did for a few years. So I went ahead and we bought that, and that was very successful. So we not only own the Golf Range Association of America, but we launched a couple of years ago the Golf Fitness Association of America. We own Vanguard Pro Shop, which is an online solution. All of these things bring us tremendous intelligence in the field of what's happening, and is a big advantage. We also work, I don't know if Nikki is on this call or not, but we've worked with the Southern California Golf Association when Nikki was the president. She still may be, for all I know. But that's an example. We work with 14 of the largest allied golf associations of the USGA. So we have all of these different pieces that we then can put together and say, what's the next strategic role? So we launched with the PGA's enthusiastic support, in fact, a GM platform about a year ago that's gone very, very well. We are, just as far as new things, the PGA is very interested in getting more professionals to come to Frisco and see how really important that is, especially to the associates who are going to be trained there and such. That's a big mission. Both Brian and I went to Frisco about 6 weeks ago. We then met at the show with the folks from the Omni who are leading that charge as well with the PGA. And so you'll see a lot of different efforts in the future on that side. We're doing some tremendously new things with the Gray Institute, probably the leading experts in mobility. We're not trying to compete with TPI in any way. We're actually trying to really talk about the foundation of movement and mobility and stability, not only in golf, but actually to help young associates, assistant professionals, and head professionals actually work more closely with their coaching and teaching students, as well as anybody else at their facilities. That's a major new effort this year. Brian and I were on with Gary Gray. He is the leading expert in the world, probably, in mobility and stability, and has worked with top athletes. Brian?
Yeah, and just to piggyback that a little bit more, John, that Rick alluded to this a little bit ago on our efforts to broaden our reach. We believe in being on the ground. So we not only have, one of the section members, Andy Warren, on our team, who used to be at the Bridges. He's been with us now 3.5 years now. And but also 7 other PGA professionals on our team that have been with us for years. Our newest member is Troy Dixon down in Austin. But our view is, how can we have our ear to the ground? And Rick just really highlighted a variety of different subjects within the golf industry, whether it's fitness, whether it's fitting, club fitting, whether it's GMs or golf shop owners. Hopefully maybe there's some golf shop owners on this as well. Certain platforms or certain specific segments of the market are for GMs like yourself, John, to speak and learn from other GMs. Golf shop owners, the same thing. Peer-to-peer engagement, we believe, is highly impactful for all. But our view isn't from our perspective, it's from the PGA professional perspective. So we spend a tremendous amount of time strategizing on how do we use yes, content, but B, also engage in the field, and what do we pull out from the field. And this goes across different markets, not just Southern Cal, but all the way through to the Southeast, to the East Coast, Upper Midwest, all the way in between. Wherever there's a PGA professional, we're hosting events. So that's a big part of how the next wave of things come from our perspective down to be relevant.
Well, and a big piece of PGA Magazine is highlighting the trends in the industry, not just from a merchandise standpoint, but also from a green fee and cart fee and usage standpoint. With your fingers on the pulse like that in this post-pandemic market, do you see it stabilizing and staying consistent? Do you see it going up? Do you see it going down? What is your feel on what you've gathered over the last 2 years in terms of the popularity of the game?
Yeah,
Rick,
so
yeah,
so
go
there's
ahead.
a couple of answers to that question, and I'm somebody who believes that my job is to figure out what the next 5 years should look like. Okay, so I believe that's true about every associate should be thinking that way. I believe every assistant professional, every head professional, general manager, owner should always be seeing, how am I going to react in the future depending on things? So to answer the first question that John just raised is, we are pretty bullish about golf demand staying very strong. We believe we have 2 major tailwinds. The first one is obviously the pandemic has changed the lifestyle for many people, not going to work 5 days a week in the office. And we think that that has helped golf tremendously. We believe that the pandemic also, unfortunately, has impacted many people's psyche and such, and golf can be a tremendous source of getting out with people and allowing them some time to decompress and such. So those things are really good. The other side is the technology that has occurred, and it started before the pandemic, is really helping that tailwind. And Topgolf, coming out of now, obviously Topgolf Callaway, is just incredibly helpful to the whole golf scene. And so it's happening at clubs, it's happening at green grass, it's happening on the golf range with TrackMan range and with Top Tracer and with many others. It's happening with simulators. It's happening off course with simulators. Ryan's talking to 3 different people that are building things, as you know, all over the place right now. So the demand side, I'm very encouraged by. The probably a 2 to 3 year window with tremendous numbers of people who are now engaging in golf, with streaming golf, obviously with Netflix now, and streaming golf changing the way they're digesting golf, but also technology that allows them to have fun, play golf, listen to music, have beer, et cetera, right on, both at the green grass level. And we're seeing tremendous growth in that trend coming to green grass. So if your course is not doing it, you have a chance to own that at your facility. And whether you're really young or whatever, something. One thing I do want to point out, we do a lot of events. We don't do too many events where we sit there and like this and talk. We like to engage with the PGA professionals in the room and let them hear from each other. So I don't want you to think that if you attend our events, this is what you're going to get, because this is a little bit outside of what we do. But
John can attest. John can
think
attest.
collectively, you are the experts. You are the top of the pyramid. You're the ones who connect locally with the golfers. You're the only ones who connect locally with the golfers. And we believe the whole industry better know that and be reminded of that all the time. I'm going to let Brian talk, and then I'm going to come back to that trends question for the other side of the trends question.
No, I don't know if there's a follow-up to that, John, but I think the biggest piece of the trend and the engagement is, there is that runway out there, and in the Southern Cal market, it is 365 days a year. There's different markets that are 6 months, a 6-month season and such, but the brands that are engaged and are in our industry, regardless of category, and many of them are in Southern California, they're doing things to retain players. And the retention side of things is a big focus, not only as an industry, but I think it's for PGA professionals, for the vendors, we call them partners, but our partners that we work with closely, which touch every category in the industry, their enthusiasm for coming into the game. There's a lot of consumers coming into the game, newbies, as well as lapsed players. And that retention piece, there's a lot of different ways to utilize the assets and relationship building opportunities that PGA members have to retain members and guests, whether you're at a public or private facility. Golf travel is one, and we focus a lot on golf travel, but fitting and coaching and all the other pieces, events. Rick and I were talking to another arm of the PGA in the PGA junior camps, recently changed the name to PGA camps. So they have a variety of different people engaged, and they're seeing the same thing on the enthusiasm for the game. But I don't want to pivot too much away from that question, John, but I do think it's also important to have some sort of understanding for all the listeners here that would be engaged with the section and building the relationships and really getting involved in the section, getting involved to build their independent network with their peers. That's a big part of how they, not only as a PGA member, could grow, needs to grow, but that's how the elevation of understanding who and what is happening around to retain players, to continue to see the growth that we've had in the industry and taking full advantage in a positive way. So that's kind of a bigger picture of how we view things on the relationship side. And I'll save some of the other pieces to some of the events that are connected to that relationship word, because it's super important for all PGA professionals to get engaged, to build their own network. You hear it time and time again, but we're somewhat close to our own backyard, whether it's a section Southern Cal or another section, but there's a lot of people across the country that can share best practices and have this almost cross-training approach.
With the resurgence of golf and the popularity of the game, there is one elephant in the room, and that's the recruitment and the growth of our associate database. With as strong as golf has come on over the last couple of years, most clubs and properties and facilities are starving for energetic, engaged, and interested associates to enroll in the program and become the future of the PGA of America. It's a source, it's a challenge point for all of us out here, where it's tough to find associates and assistant professionals that want to get in this business, because so much of this golf profession, for the longest time, when you get into it, it's really vocational. It's not the money, it's not the hours. You do it because you love the game, you want to be close to it. And the popularity of the game over the last couple of years has really brought to the forefront the fact that we are not recruiting and developing our bench for the future PGA member the way that we need to keep up with how popular the game is now. Brian, if you were going to be speaking to an associate or an inexperienced new member, how would you recommend they take advantage of your resources?
Well, in our world, be active and be a part of our programs, meaning we talk a lot about the award-winning platforms, the professional of the year, John, the assistant professional of the year, the merchandiser of the year that we host a few days before the PGA show, the teacher and coach of the year. Those are four major platforms that all section winners get together in various times of the year. But it's about building, again, going back to the network and the relationship side, building the network individually through engaging in our events. And that also, that crosses over to club fitting conferences, our insider retreats, insider conferences. We define an insider as a club member or a member, a consumer. And a PGA professional can attach themselves to one member, for example, consumer, to come to another location with us, Sun Valley, or I'm just talking about West Coast, Las Vegas, or sometimes into some other destinations where it gives that consumer a view of what PGA professionals do. But it's also about the club fitting conferences, the merchandise summits, which we just changed the name from merchandise boot camps. There's a lot of one-day events that we host in the field, and we try to spread it across the country. Southern California is very fortunate. We go into the Southern Cal. It might be up in LA, it might be in San Diego County, it might be in Ventura County, but we do have a variety of one-day events that we're in the field and in the market. But one of the things that I would say to an associate would be that embrace change because it equals an opportunity. Learn how to manage, to work with people and manage that opportunity in a way that you build relationships by meeting new people. I think it's important that associates learn how to make people feel good and embrace that connection. I think one thing that people forget about the golf industry, and I talk a bit about this with vendors, with brands that are manufacturing product in our industry. This is a relationship industry. It's a relationship business. You physically have to go to a golf course and interact with other human beings, and you have this relationship aspect and opportunity to engage. So, from an associate or a new person coming into the industry, or even interested to come in the industry, obviously what you said, John, liking or loving the game of golf is one piece of it, but then finding that area of focus, whether it's merchandising or whether it's tournament and outings, whether it's some other aspect of the golf industry, it's certainly an important part, but the relationship side is big. At the end of the day, PGA professionals are the experts. If we're not showing or even telling that story of how PGA professionals or being in the golf industry can lead to so many relationships, then we're falling a little short in that storytelling process. And you never know, John, as you know, you never know who you're going to come across. You never know who you're going to meet. So there's a lot of things that are wrapped around that question, but any new young person that I would say has an opportunity to build relationships is that's a different approach in today's world with younger generation, and relationships is a different somewhat animal.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of PGA Magazine from an online social media standpoint as it relates to younger PGA professionals coming into the industry and getting their membership?
Yeah, let me take that one. First of all, I want to come back because you mentioned something that is just as much a trend as the fact that we have more golfers. And the good news is we have them in more women golfers, more younger golfers are the growth areas that are coming, which is very favorable. But we also have all the things you just mentioned. We have a staffing challenge. We have a staffing challenge, particularly in Southern California, where the cost of housing is extremely high. We have water situations. We got other trends that are not necessarily aligning in our favor. So whether you're a young professional or assistant professional, or whether you're the general manager, these are the trends that we should be looking, and we should say, how can we talk to other professionals that are dealing with these very same trends? This is one of the biggest advantages we get as a PGA professional, is within this group that we can make a phone call, or we can go to PGA Magazine events, or we can go to section events, and we can find mentors and we can find others who can tell us their experience, and maybe that is the way to address. So we talk about all of these situations where multiple clubs now in the same area coming together and thinking about building housing for their young professionals who hopefully they can attract. These are the painful solutions that people are going through, but Bandon Dunes bought a convent literally that was going away, and they said, okay, we now have 200 rooms that we house, and they couldn't get people unless they did that. And there are a number of clubs that are doing that right now. So these are the things that the trends are not necessarily all in our favor, but overall, quite positive. Now, getting on to the question, you asked a delicate question, social media. The PGA of America, the headquarters, actually controls the social media outlets that go to the professionals. So we've been told nicely, by the way, but we've been told nicely, we want you to stay out of the social media game. We used to have an app. We don't have that anymore. And yes, you can continue with PGAmagazine.com. And as all of you should know, and hopefully you get, we lead, and it's a very, very well-respected platform. The best practices from PGA Magazine go out 6 times a week. They're all about different subjects. They go to different people. They were rated a few years ago as the #9 member benefit. PGA Magazine was #2. Unfortunately, the Masters tickets are #1, so we may not get to #1, but okay. I think we were #1 in 2021 when the Masters didn't allow attendance. But so for that year, we were #1 maybe. But we don't really get into social media per se intentionally under our agreement with the PGA. But that doesn't mean that every best practice you see is from a PGA professional where we interview that. And if your people on this call or any others have an idea that they think is worthy of disseminating, we get 20,000 opens per week on those emails. And they're only open to the PGA professionals and a few industry insiders, but that's it. So I think it positions you as an expert.
And I think it goes back to what the earlier question was of some of the challenges, John. Using a platform like the best practices, having resources and fellow professionals in different states and sections that go through a variety of challenges that are similar, maybe not exact, but there are very similar challenges. I know here in Arizona, where I live, in California, the waters, we're on the same line. There are some additional challenges that other regions and sections have gone through. And I think that's the biggest part of what we try to do, whether it's in person, digitally, or in print, is to really continue the connectivity of PGA professionals across the country so everybody can feel a part of this unit that is looking after each other, because PGA professionals peer-to-peer, it's unlike any other industry in that respect. You have the opportunity to reach out, never met a professional, but can ask them in Des Moines, Iowa, what they're doing about X, Y, or Z. And you saw that, John. I just keep going back to the POI at Bandon. The variety of thoughts and ideas that are in the room from various regions of the country are amazing. And how you tweak or modify from there and make it your own as it's relevant to your own region is one of the most important pieces of that. And that's where I think some of our events on the event side, whether they're localized in a section, but also there's a lot of events that we do from cross state lines and sections that allow us to engage peer-to-peer.
Well, you certainly do walk the walk and talk the talk. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be at Bandon in November, and you stress connectivity and you stress engagement, and that's a huge. I mean, that's 90% of what we do up there. You think that it's a golf trip. It is a golf trip, but the connection and the open forum connectivity of member to member is definitely the #1 priority of the trip. And I'm assuming it is for the teacher of the year and the associate professional of the year and the merchandise of the year workshops that you do.
And I will say this, and all the members should know this. Years ago, we thought golf was the most important piece of the business trip, because they are business trips. Everything that we do is a business environment. We don't play golf at all of our events, but as many that are listening know that when you do play golf, it's a time for additional conversations to happen in between tee boxes, on the golf course, after golf. But there's this business aspect. Years ago at the POI, we had 4 rounds of golf, John, built into the agenda. We were asked to remove golf because we wanted more indoor time and business session time with their peers. So, and that's constant across the country in any of our events that we host, because the more time that PGA members, especially from different regions of the country, have the opportunity to pick each other's brain, it allows them to grow as a professional, get reinvigorated in some particular way that they might need to find some enthusiasm or some solutions that they're challenged with. So that's a big part of how we view, and this is the most amount of talking that Rick and I would ever do. John, you can attest to that. We don't talk in our events. Our job is to facilitate and stimulate the conversation, and then let that go back and forth with idea sharing.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I always try to do is, what are the opportunities that Brian brought up before? We see changing times as a great opportunity, not a challenge. There's an opportunity. A lot of people look at them as challenges, but for everybody out there, whether you're private club, public, resort, standalone driving range, teaching facility, whatever that PGA professional is doing, we believe that a lot of the social skills, and Brian mentioned this before, are just as important as the skill set in teaching better golf. So this is from coming and listening to the PGA professionals out there and seeing who are the ones who have really done well, and what makes them so special. And very often it's how you relate to people. So I would encourage you all to really start to think in terms of who are the people around you that you can learn from, and call the leadership of the section and say, how can I get involved more at the section level? And that's a springboard to success. And the other thing I think we all know is a lot comes down to measured performance. Golf, you measure your performance on every single hole, every single shot. And then you say, how can I get better? And how can I drive the ball 5 yards longer? And how can I build my swing speed to this or that? And you monitor it. Well, we should all do that in our careers as well. How do I convince my employer, my owner, whatever, that I brought more to this facility and therefore deserve to be compensated accordingly? And so if you don't think you're being measured that way, in the right way, then you should try to create the measurement to do that, because that's part of the job. So if Brian Foligno's big in baseball. He played in college. His son's a great baseball player now, a young player in high school and doing great things. And a lot comes down to measurement. And then how do you use that measurement to improve? So it's how many, if you're at a public facility, how many interactions do you have? How many lessons have you given? How many events have you attended outside? It's all of these things. So don't look at change as being negative. Look at it as a great opportunity, but you really want to measure what you do so that you can walk in, hopefully a number of times during the year in performance reviews, and say, here's what I've done. And if they don't have those measurements, maybe you should talk to somebody, another club that has them, and figure out how you can bring that to your facility. So it's not your idea, it's somebody else's winning idea, and how it benefits the facility. So these are things that we hear about as very positive.
Fantastic. Well, you talk about the priorities of the PGA magazine is definitely promoting the PGA member, and talking about increasing the worth and the image of the PGA professional clubs across the country. I think you kind of hit that nail on the head. Any last thoughts on the topic before we conclude?
Well, I think it's just a little bit of additional insight on viewing golf travel, or even, it does not have to be, it could be literally on the in the local market. It doesn't have to be jump on a plane and go to Scotland. But golf travel, and as we have seen, elevates the PGA professional. And so many times we hear that the membership sees a different side of the PGA professional. Now, not every PGA professional has the opportunity to perhaps travel with a set of members in a private setting, but a public facility, for example, has a men's league or a women's league or a couples league, or start one in a golf travel initiative. I think that's one of the bigger, maybe easier entry points, John, for people to get involved, to then have a value to boards, members, guests, ownership. All of those pieces that Rick just highlighted is really about how do they get to know you, you get to know them, but the coaching and the teaching aspect, clinics, all of those pieces, they don't always have to happen at your facility. They can happen outside the facility as well. But those are pieces that I think are overlooked sometimes. And, you know, sometimes PGA professionals absolutely may not be interested in traveling with members or guests that they hang out with all the time. But at the same time, they have the opportunity to get to know them better. And then they can actually provide a little bit more of that value story back to ownership or whoever they're reporting to or responsible to build from there. Rick?
Yeah, and I'm just going to quickly answer a question that came on the chat for Brian and me, and I think it's a good, perfect place to do it. So 2 years ago, as you heard, the PGA, we sat down and we said, maybe there should be a platform for general managers. And the need for that platform became obvious because general managers were experts in golf. They knew the golf side. And now they were all of a sudden being asked to be the general manager of the whole facility. And the question was, how good were they in F&B? How good were they with governance? How good were they in new member, outside of the golf space? How good were they with staffing and HR and legal and water and all these things? So we felt by bringing them together and allowing them to talk to each other would be very valuable. So one thing that hasn't come up in this conversation that we are really passionate about as helping deliver a better outcome when people attend our events is we try to get like-minded people together. So if we're going to have a coaching and teaching event, we want people who coach and teach and take that very seriously. If we want to have an event around for general managers, we want general managers in the room talking to other general managers. So when we say we want you to participate in our events or whatever, if you're invited, it would be because somebody told us that you really care about merchandising. We don't just pick up the phone and just call people. That's not what we do. And it's really great because you walk into a room and everybody is passionate about club fitting. It makes a huge difference because they've been through the challenges and they know it's not easy to learn how to be a great club fitter. But now they built relationships with other people who have been through that same experience. And so that's what they hopefully get out of the room by interacting, as Brian said. Go ahead, Brian.
We talk a lot about that word segmentation and segmenting the PGA professionals who have the interest in club fitting or merchandising and such. When we talk about our partners in the brands that we work with and PGA professionals, they want to understand who are the ones that are interested in fitting or hard goods or soft goods. But we average 40 attendees at our club fitting conferences across the country. Now, you may think that you have to be an expert in club fitting to attend one of those, but they are from literally the very highest level at that particular, in that particular segment of club fitting, down to the person who is just entering or interested in club fitting. And anywhere in between, that's the type of person of those club fitting conferences that we want to get together. But it's also about what our what are we doing to help the professionals in the GM platform, for example? There's over 2,200 PGA GMs in the industry that are a part of this opportunity to learn from each other. And I think as GM specifically, food and beverage, there's this maybe misunderstanding that you have to be an expert in all of these areas before you become a GM. John, you're a GM. I mean, were you an expert in every category under the sun to become a GM when you walked in that door? I mean, that's the part where we really are passionate about connecting these people to really help them understand that there's this process and layering process, but there's a lot of professionals out there that are resources, and we try to help connect those resources together, those people. And again, it goes back to that thing that we've talked about a lot, and that is relationships. So if there's anybody that's entering our industry as an associate, an established PGA member, it's elevating the relationships to then be able to elevate your network and then connect them in the various categories they're interested, whether it's GMs or fitting or merchandise and such. And this is really a combination of how we take our PGA professionals on our team, as well as other people that we've gotten to know across the industry that are willing to help us to be a part of our bigger team to help everybody come together so they can all be elevated as far as what their passion is, as far as the industry itself.
Fantastic. Well, on behalf of the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA, we are really grateful for the two of you to carve out some time to come on the webcast with us this morning. Rick Summers, CEO of PGA Magazine, Brian Foligno, President of PGA Magazine. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the webcast this morning. And for all the PGA professionals that are on this morning's call, you will receive 1 PDR credit for attending the hour-long interview. And again, thank you, everybody, for attending. Brian, Rick, take care, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Guys.
Bye now.